Our topic is going to be volunteer appreciation, celebrating your supporters. And I just want to let you know that, again, use that chat box because that's our tool for having you all connect with each other and also for us being able to hear from you questions or thoughts and ideas as well. And if you would like to enable live transcript closed captioning, we do have that, and you can do so at the bottom of your Zoom dialog box. And I want to say thank you for joining us. My name is Court, and I work here at Get Connected by Galaxy Digital. I get the joy of working in creative communications and outreach. And if you're not familiar with us, Get Connected is our best-in-class volunteer management software, and we serve thousands of organizations across North America. And our software, Get Connected, is designed specifically to meet the needs of volunteer managers and their programs. And so that's why we get the joy of working with volunteer leaders each and every day. Just really listening to you and hopefully creating tons of helpful resources that help you in your day-to-day work. So today we have our special panel on volunteer appreciation featuring Elizabeth Donovan. Elizabeth is our head of Get Connected Network team, who brings her experience working with nonprofits as well as state organizations to implement tools that support sustainable programming. And Elizabeth is responsible for connecting communities through technology and relationships. I'm really excited also to have our Get Connected Success Team Manager, Maya Price, who brings years of experience in volunteer management and development to work with organizations all over North America in cultivating processes that put community first. So really grateful to have Maya with us today. And we also have AK Diefenbach, one of our regional managers from our Get Connected Network team. And AK is going to be joining us in managing the chat box where you can ask all the questions and share all of your great ideas. AK comes from a background of executive leadership experience at an affordable housing nonprofit. And we'll all work together to keep this a really healthy and respectful space where folks who are, we've got folks all over, America and the world. And we also have folks who are maybe brand new to volunteer management and those who've been doing this for a while. So we've got a full range of really great experiences, stories, and ideas. And so with that, I'll go ahead and share screen. All right, so we're going to get started. Today, we're talking about volunteer appreciation with Volunteer Appreciation Month coming up. And this is a really fun time for us to talk about celebrating supporters. And yes, this comes around once a year, but we're going to talk about how do we weave that in throughout the whole volunteer experience in your program today. So what we'll cover today is what is volunteer appreciation, the benefits and challenges of a successful volunteer appreciation strategy, and practical tips and resources for thanking your volunteers. Could look different at any organization and also for different groups of volunteers or individual volunteers. So stay to the end for some of those practical tips and also a little Q&A time for volunteer appreciation. And we're going to talk about just creating a culture of volunteer appreciation and how you can start weaving appreciation throughout the volunteer life cycle, which we have some really great resources on our website about the volunteer life cycle, and tools that are going to make volunteer appreciation just a little bit easier on you. So it's not quite such a big lift. And Elizabeth, I'll just hand it over to you here to go ahead and tell us a little bit about what, just so we're starting on the same page, like what's a general idea of what volunteer appreciation is?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And I think, overall, this piece is just that, as it's written, process, recognizing volunteers for their time and efforts as a holistic strategy. And I think that's the one thing I always like to think about is that holistic strategy. I was in a different meeting this week where we were talking about like humans, we want to be seen and we want to be appreciated, but that piece of why we're coming to volunteer, they're there because of your cause, they're there because of the work, but they're still humans that want to be seen and appreciated. And that how do we show them that we see them? I think that is across your organization, not just your volunteer program or department. A lot of what we're going to talk about is how do you create that culture so that everybody feels like part of their job as a team member, as a volunteer, as the CEO, as the person who parks cars, that moment of everybody understands how to appreciate each other and make that a culture that you're supporting. Because if you're supporting community, then you're naturally supporting higher rates of volunteer engagement. You're naturally supporting retention. You're engaging the volunteers to come back because they felt important, they felt seen, they felt integral to the work, they felt like they made a difference, they keep coming back. So I think a lot of this is just how do we create that feeling of community, culture, appreciation, being seen? What are those just tactics? But overall, it's an attitude. And I think that's the exciting part. It's kind of like that person that greets you with a smile on their face. Like, how does that just roll top down so that when people are coming in, they're feeling like they're in a place they want to come back to? That may have been more than you wanted, Court.
No,
I was supposed to
great. I
just
love
write
it.
the slide. I messed that up.
No, you're great. I do love that idea because the idea of kind of creating a holistic strategy where volunteer appreciation is more than just one event, because that one event might be actually a lot easier. If you do have one really big volunteer appreciation event annually, it might be a lot easier to get people engaged and excited about that coming when there's lots of like little pieces of appreciation that are kind of woven throughout their experience. One simple thing that you mentioned about appreciation coming from the top down, one of the organizations that I've spent the most time with, every time I get almost barely out of the parking lot to walk in, the director of the program just says, "Thank you, Court. Thank you. Thank you for being here." And I always kind of giggle a little bit because I tell them like, well, I haven't done anything yet. I just got here. But it is sort of that idea that that's that person's just way of being. And it makes a huge difference because I always smile. It makes a huge difference. I always smile. And I know that, even though I haven't done anything yet, I start off with that smile on my face that they've already thanked me for just being there. Makes the work go a lot more smoothly. So, and it's really a part of engagement and retention, which are really key concerns, I think, for most volunteer organizations. So supporting that culture of volunteer appreciation really makes it more of like a natural flow for those higher rates of volunteer engagement and retention. And they're the ones who are really invested in your program outcomes, and they come back again and again. And often those are your volunteers too, who are excited to, share, just via word of mouth, they'll recruit their friends and family. So it's an exciting prospect to really think of like, what are some small layers of what we can do to infuse this? So would love to hear in the chat, what are your thoughts on creating a culture of volunteer appreciation and sort of weaving it throughout? And let's talk about a little bit some of the challenges here. Maya, I felt like you had some really great thoughts on these the other day, because we were sort of talking about some of the common challenges really have to do with being able to, just get in contact with individual volunteers or volunteers' individual experiences, but then also as a whole of the program. What would you say are some of the bigger challenges in doing volunteer appreciation strategy really well?
Right. So I think it is a interesting time in kind of the volunteerism world. It's changing a lot based on who we engage, right? There are a lot more digital natives entering the volunteer space. So individuals who are used to kind of like, I think of it as like Amazon Prime timeline volunteering, right? Logging in, getting what they need, 1-day shipping sort of deal. And so with that, sometimes I think it is always a good step, no matter where you are in kind of your volunteer management journey, to look at the volunteer group as a whole, right? Like, what communities are you engaging? And what do you kind of know about these communities from your experience with them? Are they a person who would prefer kind of that sort of quick and easy experience? Are they volunteering for a specific reason? If you can start to identify that, you can start to identify some really good goals that will drive, like I said, like Court said, the holistic kind of volunteer appreciation at your organization.
Maya, that's a really great point. So how, this is a little creative question, like, how would a volunteer program set goals around appreciation? You know, how would you be able to articulate that and kind of see if you were actually doing it well?
Yeah, I think, goals could be, things that you want to implement, right? So in a year, you could say, we want to implement a better system for recognizing individuals maybe on their birthday, or recognizing them once they reach a certain hour threshold. Those are really sort of uh, tangible-ish things, right, that we can put into play. But I think also you could set a goal, right, of identifying the main 5 communities, right? Anything that you can add numbers-ish to is going to be good when you're goal setting. And I think another piece there is to also think about, just went in one ear and out the other, but another good thing, I got it now, that you might want to think about when you're goal setting is what conversations can you have with other individuals in your organization, whether that be your program staff or even your leadership staff around, what are the main 3 tenets of your volunteer appreciation strategy.
Well, gosh, I love that because all of what you just said made it sound a lot more doable. Really deciding like what are our organization's tenets, like how are we going to do this? And then it does make it much more measurable. I will say one of the programs that I've been involved with, one of the things that is done is not only is there like an annual one event, but every volunteer gets celebrated on their birthday or the shift that they're working closest to their birthday. So that's kind of one of those things that's like, okay, if I'm collecting data on my volunteers, and that's one of the things that we're going to do, which makes it sort of sporadic. But what's really fun about it is that all the other volunteers on the shift get to also eat the cake. And so it's not just that one person being appreciated, it's really everybody that's on shift that day, which is so sweet. Literally, but collecting that data and making sure that it's accessible to the person who's in charge of ordering the birthday person's specific cake, and really being able to say, this is like the one thing that we're going to make sure that we do throughout the year, because I think you don't have to pick everything. Elizabeth, I know that was something we chatted about the other day, is just not trying to do all of the things, because and one of the things down here we had under point 8 is, that fear of accidentally leaving somebody out of appreciation efforts can sometimes make you not want to do certain things. And I think that actually is a really good sort of case for doing things throughout the year, is because it's less pressure on one big thing and feeling worried that you don't have all the volunteers' accurate contact information, right? So you're not going to be able to invite everybody because maybe they didn't see the flyer in the main hall or whatever. And so I think it's a good case for finding what are those top 2 or 3 things that you are going to commit to. And as Maya was saying, really what your tenets are for how you're going to do appreciation at your organization. It doesn't have to be everything.
And if I can just jump in here, one of the things that I found was, if you are in your volunteer management, if you are studying and looking at and evaluating your processes, look how you can infuse that volunteer appreciation into those processes, right? Even starting with the application process. If you have a volunteer that's having to go back and forth with you, right? Like you send them an email and get them another form and send them another email and another form, like it's a higher friction experience for them to get involved. And so the more streamlined and the more kind of volunteer centric you can make things that really matter for your volunteers, the better. And once those foundation pieces are laid, it's a lot easier to start to bring in some of these more recognition-based appreciation ideals.
Yeah, that's so true. AK, is anyone sharing what their greatest challenges are with appreciation efforts at their organization? I'm curious if anyone's sharing specific challenges they're having in the chat.
Oh yeah, we've got some good conversations going in the chat. We've got some great ideas to combat some of these challenges, as well as some, I think things that really resonate with a lot of groups, including all staff buy-in and how leadership appreciation needs to come all at the organization. Had a really cool story about a dinner where we had a staff where they're working directly with volunteers that enjoyed baking. So they provided an array of homemade desserts for their April dinner as a like group bonding experience. I thought that was really cool. You know, we all love sweets, so we're hitting a bunch of markers there with that, as well as some milestones for awards and care packages, and then starting to drop some information about how people have had successful surveys and just really kind of finding that holistic approach.
It's really interesting that I just saw one flash apart where that number 8, accidentally leaving someone out. And I know our group, as we talked about even this webinar, there's that moment of you feel like you have time. So you do a really good job, maybe celebrating Court. And the next month you're really busy and you didn't get time to celebrate Maya. And now Maya's like, well, I've been here so much longer than her and I'm much more amazing than Court is. You know, like that a moment of like, have I upset someone? I was just thinking through something, one of my, I live very close to a volunteer director of the Hands-On Asheville Center. And she was saying that one of the things her volunteers love is being asked for their opinion and their feedback. And I know there are those tipping points when you go from a handful of volunteers where, as we started, you can see them, you can recognize them. It's easy to make sure you know them by name when you're greeting them, to that quantity that you're like, I don't want to miss somebody. And there's too many of them for me to make sure I did this right. I think to Maya's point, you know, finding systems, having automation, having thank yous built into your process is great. But part of what you may be able to do is let the volunteers have that feedback. Because I think some things we've seen is if I ask all of us here, let's nominate someone, then it doesn't have to be everyone. It's self-driven from the volunteers where somebody's story, something they appreciated gets highlighted. And that moment of if you make that part of the culture where each month you're doing that, or they know that in April next year, there'll be more time to nominate someone for the next April recognition, then you're actually letting the volunteers have a voice, an opinion, they're giving you feedback. And it's not, I chose Court, now Maya's hurt. It's that moment of our volunteers came together to recognize some of those special stories. So that thinking through things that can take off that fear, but be able to step forward and do something. I think that's the challenge, but also a really cool challenge. Because if we can do it and not be scared, most volunteers are there because they care and they want to make a difference in a cause. They're really not there because they want to get the biggest trophy or that spotlight on themselves, but they want to feel appreciated. And those stories of why they matter, sometimes just seeing someone else be appreciated makes me feel appreciated because I know I do a similar thing. So I'm also having that same impact. So yeah, I think that fear piece is one thing I really want to encourage this group to get past. I don't think there's anyone who's ever really felt, oh, you know, and maybe that's a story. Have you ever had someone feedback where you feel like there's an effort that you tried that did blow up in your face? Sometimes we learn from our failures. So I would love to see some of those too. If there's something where like, I learned not to do it this way, but to do it this way. I think that would be really interesting for the group to hear that AK you can watch for us.
Yeah, I've also seen some other challenges come up too, regarding just funding, and I know we'll come to that with some ideas at the end, but I want to also just make sure everybody feels like you're in this community. I think this chat is a really good place. I want to kind of direct that to there. If you see something and you have an idea, feel free to drop it in there. We've got some good conversations rolling. If you have ideas that you want to share, you can drop there too, and we'll keep raising things up. But yeah, we're excited to see what are some solutions that we've got too.
Yeah, funding I think is a big concern, especially over gifts. And I think there are some creative ways of kind of working around that for receiving donations, especially if you have a relationship in the local community, maybe with a business that has regular volunteers that come, or sometimes it's a way that businesses will partner with local organizations because they may or may not be able to send volunteers. That's one of the ways that I've been able to obtain some gifts in the past. And sometimes it's, food donations for volunteers, like surprise coffee and bagels or things like that, or donated tickets as well for events or gift cards or things. So let's talk about some of these benefits. Maya, what would you say? I felt like you had a lot of really interesting stories about what were some of maybe the long-term benefits of solid volunteer appreciation at your organization?
Yeah, so prior to my time here with Get Connected, one of the things that I did was I was a volunteer coordinator for a free medical clinic here in Western North Carolina. And that was just a place where we just had a really strong culture of appreciation, right? Because these are our volunteers who are coming in and helping people directly with their medical needs. But a lot of the times we had volunteers who were there who were also volunteering to help supplement their pre-professional goals, right? Like going to med school or PA school or what have you. But one of the great things that I found is that treating every single person with appreciation, no matter if they were there to fulfill sort of a pre-professional obligation or they were just there because they had extra time, allowed us to have volunteers have a better experience, and then they are able to take, for the example was we had a medical student who took all the great stories of his time spending the summer with us back to his group at medical school, and then later told that same story to his group in residency. And then we were able to form a relationship a little bit later down the road with his residency program, which allowed us to have even more volunteers. And that, from what I understand, that partnership has continued to grow and strengthen. So you never know exactly where that next opportunity or relationship is going to come from just by showing appreciation in the day-to-day.
Yeah, agreed. I think I've seen similar things happen where sometimes with programs that I've worked with where kids who are a part of the program as community members, they grow up and move away, whatever they do, go up to school, who knows, get a job, come back, and then they want to volunteer over the summer. And I always find that to be really amazing. It's because they had such positive experiences at the program. And now they want to, now that they're adults, go ahead and give back. And of course, it's just really exciting to see that sort of continue, and knowing that it was because of the whole community aspect and the way that the community was appreciated as a part of this program. And it's really interesting because when I look at the benefits of volunteer appreciation in general, like I would say, like these are a lot of the positive benefits of just volunteerism, that the volunteer might experience. There have been some, I don't know if anyone has seen the article recently, but there are some really cool studies that came out about, what makes people feel, happiest the older we get. And a lot of times it is community. And specifically, they've studied that community formed through volunteerism is often the type of community that actually makes us the happiest. Which has been really interesting. It was I think it was like a 80-year Harvard study or something like that on happiness. Google it. But, it's interesting to see this. Like, I think you could even just say increased engagement in life and things that you're interested in, a strong sense of community. And I think that when people feel that at your organization and at your program, then you do have all of those like long-term benefits of how you're supporting the community. Anything that anyone else would like to add there?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely think not being afraid of creating a social environment within your volunteer community is key, especially if you want to kind of build some of those long-term relationships. I'm definitely taking notes. I'm moving to a city with my partner where we don't know anybody, and definitely plan to get involved there as well to make new friends and meet new people.
I think that piece, Texas Roadhouse is on here, but you see that so often where like businesses want business, but they also want to support the community. So sometimes it's thinking about those win-wins, like how can I have, a restaurant where I ask them to do a drink and an appetizer for everybody, but we're going to be there for a meeting. So post appetizer and drink, as we stay, we're probably going to spend more money to do other things. Maybe some people will stay there for dinner. So they have a chance to make business, but at the same point, you're getting your group together outside of maybe your nonprofit. I think we've seen that theme and feedback in a lot of places. It's taking them for coffee together. So they're building relationships as a group. So it's not just them returning to that shift, it's them returning to the people that they enjoy being with, that are working together, that are addressing a change in their community because there's a cause that they have in common. I think, some of the examples we've seen that they did locally was pairing up with different places like the local baseball stadium to have tickets. And so the stadium was able to say, it's volunteer appreciation night. We've got these volunteers coming from these 4 organizations. And that lets them show the community they're invested in the community, but it lets those nonprofits give tickets to their volunteers to come out together to do something fun outside of the norm, but building those community relationships. So I do think sometimes it's just asking, what would you be able to do? What are you interested in? But how do you do it in such a way that the business actually gets some promotion out of it, or is able to show they're giving back? I think that's that little bit of just that win-win. We feel like we're asking if we can think of a way to be able to promote what they're doing in our newsletter, or let someone know about it because it's going to be an event that the radio station might talk about. That lets you really think about getting more and more of this, and they'll do it again because it wasn't just them giving. They're able to actually see something that's building around the program.
Yeah, I really like to think of that as cross-pollination,
Mhm.
and community building, like how, making it a win-win for everybody involved, your organization, your volunteer program, the volunteer, their experience, and whomever your community partner is, and a community partner can be a restaurant. Like, why not? So absolutely.
It plays into the goals that Maya was talking about too. Like, that's that longer term strategy. You can think through, I'm going to find 2 restaurants. I'm going to find one big event that we can get free tickets to. I'm going to plan for that. I'm going to couple that with maybe a volunteer story that I'm going to collect once a month, and a board member that's going to write a letter that can go out to all my volunteers next month. So you're setting these goals and these benchmarks. So it's not this big weight on you to pull it together for April. It's this kind of program. What are my goals? What are the things I think would be impactful that I can share again across the organization, to say, I'm looking to fill in 10 stories. Let's find a story each month so that we're not scrambling to find these stories, but that they're naturally being part of what we're looking for. We look for it, we'll find it. If you forget to look for it until the end and you're like, what happened? You told me about something that happened. What was that story? It's never as good as in the moment where you can grab that picture, that strong testimonial, that story that impacted somebody's life. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's jump into some of these tools and practices. Unless AK, is there anything that you want to share from the chat that I'm not seeing? It's moving very quickly, so I'm not able to keep up.
It is. No, it's so good. Everybody is chatting away. No, I think we're finding some really great ideas, about just what you guys are saying, just going to businesses and asking, I think there's a chance to share some marketing, placement of ads, or saw an event where they were able to put their poster on a sign, or their article somewhere. I think there's a big piece there also just within your departments, just crossing over other departments, where are there assets you can start to leverage, or packages you can put together with your corporate partners to help with these different pieces of the financial barriers that comes to this? Because I know a lot of programs are running on some low budgets, so we get it. And just making sure that impact is there. I just dropped another article about communicating that impact to your volunteers. I think being able to come full circle with that story is also important for their retention as well. Just making sure they feel that they have seen what you're doing with these efforts within your community and why you're trying to do things for them.
Yeah, and I think one of those benefits that we just had on the last slide is really a benefit of volunteer appreciation and a holistic volunteer appreciation strategy is that you really do start to cultivate those volunteer leaders. So like maybe there are folks who come like every single week, right? Versus the, one time here and there or random. There's people who come every Tuesday at noon or whatever their shift is, right? And some of those people who are, your consistent folks, that of those, you might start to notice that some of them have a desire to do more, maybe take on a little bit more responsibility. And some of those folks are the ones that might be able to help you expand your community partnership network. They might be able to be the ones to kind of go have those conversations and say, hi, I'm a volunteer at this organization. I've been volunteering there for like 3 years, every Tuesday at the same time. And we would love to kind of, create a partnership with you where we can promote your business, but and as a sponsor, as a partner, and then also that you'd be able to maybe provide us with, some small gifts for our volunteers who just show up every week. And we just want to say thank you. And we like local businesses. You're doing something in the community. We're doing something in the community. Like, how can we work together and get creative? And some of those volunteer leaders might be able to have those conversations on your behalf. And you could definitely talk to them about that. Maya, what were you going to say?
And don't hesitate to look and see if some of those relationships already exist within your community, right? It is very often that you might be able to see that, a fourth of our volunteers last month came from the local college or university. Maybe there's a baseball game that we can get them to, or maybe there's something there that we can get them to, or maybe you notice that a lot of your volunteers last month came from the local grocery store chain, right? And there might be something that you can appreciate them, not only with their organization, but also talk a little bit about how you can strengthen that relationship moving forward.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that everything you need is like probably just a few asks away. It's just in my time of working mostly in communications, especially for a variety of different organizations, I learned that just the more you were kind of willing to just have those things and kind of put it out there, how amazing it was to be able to see what came back. And oftentimes it was better than you could imagine. And so I always think that that's really, sort of a principle that I try to live by. And also when I'm working with different organizations, just like, don't be scared to talk about yourself. And because you're doing something really important in your community. And a lot of times too, just like, sometimes people would help if they knew more. They might not even be aware that your community is facing a certain issue. They might not even be aware of your cause, but once they become educated about it, they may become your most passionate volunteers. So sometimes even having a conversation with a business about a volunteer appreciation gift could lead to something, to greater something than that. So, one of the things too that I was thinking about is just sharing volunteer appreciation very openly. So it's not only with your volunteers, right? So it's something you could feature on your volunteer website. You could spotlight volunteers. You can share it in your organization's like e-newsletter, share pictures of volunteers on social media. And I would say definitely if you have the opportunity, if you are doing printed materials, using, photos of real volunteers, of course, when people have given permission, but as opposed to like stock images or like only, graphic design words, but really using those photos of actual volunteers in everything that you're doing, it really highlights that, that you really appreciate these folks who are coming in. So even in your recruitment efforts, people are like, oh, look at there's the volunteers, and it's a chance to really spotlight them. So you're not just appreciating to them or to the volunteer group as a whole, but really, to the community, like these are our volunteers. Don't you want to be a part of this? Of course, they benefit from seeing that as well, but not to be shy about sharing that with everyone. Any thoughts on some of these ideas here for tools and practices?
I was going to say I'm not sure if this relates to that question, but I was going to say in the chat, one of the things that that how and what those stories need to be, keep your marketing hat on to a degree. Because just like Court said, when they see a picture, they click through it and they may want to do that activity. When you're drawing out these stories, they may love doing something that you didn't even realize is why they're coming back week after week. So take that story, take that picture and ask a lot of questions, because it's very possible there's people like them. Just like Maya said, where you're coming out of the grocery store, what the grocery store team came, how do I think about why and what they could be supported with? If I see that somebody's there because they were a participant in the program as a youth and that's why they're back, then that moment of like, how many of our youth are in this area that if they knew we needed volunteers for the thing they participated in, they'd come back. And that's a great story. So I could find people like that. So I think it's always having on that kind of detective hat to see the threads in that. And now, Court, what was your original question? So that stuck in my brain. And so I completely did not go off.
No, I love that idea. That's a great idea. I think this is kind of where we're sort of, bringing together this idea of like a holistic appreciation strategy, and really how, it provides momentum for other aspects of your program where, you put a lot of energy into recruitment. But this is also part of that, like people being able to see that and feel that and connect with those stories. And I would just say, like, unabashedly sharing your volunteer appreciation is maybe some of the best recruitment. And especially when those volunteers feel really appreciated and they know that they really matter through whatever, means you choose to do it. I would say we do have some really great resources on marketing your volunteer program and social media for volunteer programs, specifically on our website and our learning center at galaxydigital.com. And so if you're feeling like some of those things are a barrier for you, we're not going to leave you without support there. So we do have tons of articles, videos, all kinds of how-tos on how to really like juice those efforts up, and also to make it easy by maybe training a volunteer to help you with those things as well.
And we talked about you kind of can over tap a story or over tap a volunteer to keep telling their story, because it's so powerful that's the emotion, that's the impact. But they've already told it to one group, and now you're asking them to tell it to another group. And it's how do you make something that can live beyond the moment? So I think part of, making your goals for how do I catch these moments throughout the year, but then how do I then automate them? So the video ideas that are coming up in the chat, like that's so powerful to get that quick little video. And then as Maya said, once you've got kind of how I've made a frictionless volunteer experience, then maybe it's a video that you incorporate into your volunteer software. I know some of our clients get connected or putting in, a thank you video inside their thank you notification. So after they volunteer, they automatically see that video that thanks them. Those moments of when they're signing up for things, or on the volunteer recruitment page, when they're signing up to schedule themselves for their next shift, our clients are incorporating pieces there where you see the pictures, you have the story that goes out to the people once a month in an e-blast that focuses on the volunteer that's done a lot that month. So all of these things are kind of like, how do I take one really special moment and get a picture, a story, a video that I can incorporate into the software or into my process or into just my rhythm of email, follow-up, thank you note, so that I can take that one powerful moment and spread it as far as it can go. And then how do I get the next one so I can keep it fresh? Because just like a billboard, it starts to lose weight once I've seen it 2 or 3 times.
Right. And Elizabeth, I just want to add something there too. When you are also thinking about these moments that a volunteer interacts with you or any of the content that you send out, that's not only a moment for them to see information from you, but that's also an opportunity for you to get information from them, whether that's like a button asking them to upload photos from their time, right? Asking them to give a little 2-sentence description or any notes about their experience. That is all stuff you can kind of get in the feedback loop for future appreciation efforts.
I really love that idea of creating that feedback loop, because that's really where the momentum comes from, so that you don't feel like you're just constantly pushing out and trying to, but like really like offering something and then also asking a question again, like, hey, I want to thank you for coming. Do you have any thoughts on your experience you'd like to share? That's like an amazing way of sort of, again, weaving. What's that?
It increases buy-in too with
Yeah.
the volunteer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an opportunity to weave in appreciation and engagement, and you don't have to like necessarily send a survey at that point, because you've sort of made it a part of your process to always get that feedback. Interestingly enough, people who are asked what their opinions and thoughts are on things feel really appreciated. They feel really important because they're like, oh, you cared about my experience. And so it's really interesting to think about, what kind of seems a little bit like almost like a customer service sort of thing, like, how did you like this product? But really it's a chance of, yeah, creating that feedback loop that builds more momentum, more relationship. So yeah, and this is just some really fun images of some of the ways we have automation inside of our Get Connected volunteer management software, where you can, have volunteers that can kind of keep a record of their benchmarks. They know when they've reached certain hours, and all of that is something that that our Get Connected network clients, they use regularly. So it's kind of fun to see like when those dates are reached, when they reach all of those little like milestones for themselves. I feel like that's a way that volunteers sort of have that ongoing appreciation, because every time they log into their profile, they see it and they remember it, and it's special. So that's fun as well.
Those benchmarks are, I think I had a moment with some of the United Ways where they have like the diamond donors. Like there's that moment of like just the impact there to know this person's put in that many hours, or this person's been with an organization that many years. It's a little bit of, as you're bringing in fresh faces and new blood and younger generations, it is that inspiring moment too, because how long they've worked on something because this mattered to them. That moment of like, oh, I put in 4 hours, that's enough. That moment of, oh, they've put in, 4 years of this at 2 hours every single week for 4 years. Oh, that's inspiring. I wonder if I could go that long. Like it's telling those stories so people consider beyond just the one time. They start to see those rhythms of more.
Yeah, and I think what's nice about that too is for some reason right now I'm having the memory of like book club at my school coming up in elementary school, where it's like, if you read this many books, I grew up in the era of pizza parties where you got the little pizza if you read the books. And what was cool about it is because it played with a little bit of this like idea of gamification. We do have an article about that in our learning center, about how when you kind of set the standard from the beginning and say like, this is what, people who have served with us a year get to go to this special event with us, or they get to have lunch with the director or something like that. Whatever it is, it helps set the standard and kind of gives something for someone to look into the distance for, and sort of helps them with the like week to week. And also what's cool is that then they get a chance to really see what are the impact and outcomes from my time here. Like over the last year, what have we been able to do together that really made a difference for this cause or in our community? And I'm a big believer in relationships and long-term relationships in through volunteerism, and really being able to see the impact and outcomes of a program over time. So I'm excited to do anything that's going to help volunteers want to stay long-term, because I really think that that's where they're going to experience the most deep personal meaning, and also really get to know the ins and the outs, and get to know people that they're working with just very in a more deep way. And I think it's just so meaningful that way. Some of my favorite relationships have been people I've met and connected with through my experience in volunteering.
I think some of this feels a little bit like that. We're talking right now to a lot of volunteer coordinators and directors, and you all know a lot personally of exactly what Court was talking about. So the other thing that's just striking me as I'm thinking about to that starting, how do you do the culture? How do you get all the departments? How do you get that kind of buy-in? One of the things that we were talking about earlier this week was just starting, it's that natural humans don't like to not have their homework done, but starting that kind of culture of kudos, or that culture of bringing up stories and thank yous, so that they start to equivocate in all the other departments how this volunteer is carrying a workload that is so critical to the organization, where they may be replacing a head count that the budget didn't allow for. So thinking through, like, how do you say in this meeting, I just want to share with the staff, a little kudos, I had the volunteer X come in and help me with this, and without that person being there, I couldn't have gotten the food delivery out on time, or I wouldn't have been able to handle the 3 families that showed up at once. Really amazing work by that volunteer. That story then prompting, hey, did any of the rest of the staff have stories that you can share from this week? We want to make sure we're bringing those stories to light. So that moment of like, if they haven't been paying attention or looking for them, then this piece of incorporating something into a weekly staff meeting or a monthly staff meeting, where the staff is bringing that story, that kudos, that recognition of what the volunteer program is starting to incorporate, that opens their eyes to look for something if they haven't been watching for it, which can also give you legs to talk about when you see that happening. Thank you for bringing it to us. Did you do anything in that moment to thank that volunteer? How would you like to thank that volunteer? Maybe we can think about something that when you see that, you've got that thank you coupon, or you've got that invitation to this event we're going to host next month, where we're going to take all of our volunteers to do something. And we'd like you to invite them because you've started building a relationship with them because they're critical to your department. I think thinking through some strategies like that can just be ways we don't do things naturally, but if we're prompted to look for it or to start doing it, sometimes having that thing in my pocket or having that question in my mind lets me actually do something that I just don't think about in the moment because I'm focused on doing something else. So I wanted to throw that out too, as we move into kind of how do we get this holistic picture that Court's got up on the screen.
I think you also made me think of something that I wanted to ask Maya. It really made me sort of consider who are really all of the people who need to receive volunteer appreciation, because sometimes we're appreciating them to, the individual volunteer, to the group of volunteer or team of volunteers. But then I feel like what Elizabeth is talking about, sort of makes me think there's this other layer of sharing our appreciation amongst the team, the staff, the organization. Who else would be on that list that needs to experience that volunteer appreciation outside of just the volunteers and the volunteer teams?
I think
Oh, go ahead.
that's just that, she was posing it to you. I think that's just it's such an important question. I'm interested to hear what you say, Maya.
Oh, yeah, no, I think, of course, when you're speaking to volunteers, you're expressing that appreciation to them directly, right? But there's also, I think, a moment, like Elizabeth says, with the staff. And if you are a type of organization that has direct clients, right? I think it's also, that's an important story to tell about not only, getting to appreciate your volunteers, right? But that there's a community around kind of helping each other there. And I think that's just beautiful in and of itself. But I think then that story can also be told to places where maybe you're looking to recruit volunteers from as well. I think I've mentioned colleges and universities beforehand, right? But if your local service learning coordinator at your college or university knows, oh, whenever my students go and volunteer at X place, they always come back with a great time and great stories. And that really feeds into, our goals as a service learning community. That's something that's really important. Telling that story just on a public stage, right, is going to present that to not only your individual kind of stakeholders, but people who you might not have reached prior.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm also thinking about, the chance to do, presentations for your board and like sharing these stories as well, because it's another layer of everything that you're doing as a volunteer leader, really making sure these programs get, completed, that you've got all the power that you need to get those programs out there to serve your community. But it's another layer, of kind of showing that juice of everything that you're putting in, all the resources that are coming together to really make this very necessary need be met in your community. So I do think there's a lot of opportunities for storytelling, which of course I love. But yeah, that idea of sharing it on a larger stage and sharing it to really specific folks. And I think it's great because Elizabeth, a little bit about what you were mentioning is just, really sharing it with your whole organization and what you're doing in the volunteer aspect is really supportive of, other departments at your organization as well, and also helps them to be excited to pass somebody in the hall and say thank you to them, because maybe they have, last year we had a great volunteer appreciation discussion, and we had Gina Edwards, right, Maya, is it from Heart of Illinois? Do you
Yes.
remember what Gina's sticker said? It was like a name tag and it said, "Hi, I'm a volunteer." And it was like, basically they wore these name tags and it was like all these cool things that you do. Like, I'm a carer, I'm a this, I'm a that, I show up, I'm a volunteer. Hi, and then it had their name on it.
I think it was like in the design of like, "Hi, my name is,"
Yeah.
sort of stickers, right? But those are stickers not only that they could wear on the day, but like, I'm also a fourth grader. I am very much motivated by the next sticker that I get to stick on a water bottle or agenda. So sometimes things even as small as that are great. And, maybe it's a sticker that they can stick on the back of their car, to promote that they are a volunteer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a volunteer. And just like, I think having things like that, if it's a t-shirt or sticker or something that identifies that person when they're on site with your organization as a volunteer, even people who aren't working directly with the volunteers, they can then identify them and start to say, "Oh, that's a volunteer." Like, "Hey, thank you for being here," even if they're, running down the hall to a meeting or something because they have a different role. So I think anything that like really identifies them. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I just want to talk about a few things, and then we'll just like see if there's time for some Q&A. I don't know if there's any questions or just maybe really great ideas from the chat that we just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about here at the end. But I want to let you know that we're going to send out the recording to you on Monday of this presentation. You're also going to get a copy of all of the slides, a number of resource articles and other videos, and also a planning guide, just to help ask some great questions about your own program. And some of the questions are really going to be revolving around these 3 points. It's just evaluating where you can weave in appreciation in your own organization. And then doing a little bit about what Maya was talking about earlier is like clearly defining the ways that your program is going to express appreciation, because you don't have to do everything. I always say pick one thing, get it consistent, and then add the next thing and get it consistent before you add anything. That's how I do things. And it has helped me not feel pulled in a lot of different directions. So once you can create a program and a process around one form of appreciation that meets one tenet, then add another thing and develop that program and process. And I think that will help to maybe mitigate some of the energy spend that this can feel like and can definitely be. Let's not gloss over that. And also just really cultivating those processes and developing which tools are going to actually help me simplify some of this, because a lot of volunteer leaders, not only are you doing all of the volunteer management things, but a lot of times you're also like filling in for programming. So, or volunteer management might only be one piece of everything that you are responsible for at your organization. So really finding tools and processes that are going to support you. So yeah, AK, take it to the chat. Tell us what we've got going on here.
Yeah, we just had a question come up, and it kind of came up earlier as well about some virtual opportunities for recognition, as well as if they just don't have direct access to volunteers, or as we all know, a lot of that volunteer space has changed a lot. So what are some ideas about if they have no physical site, ways to kind of develop the same idea without having that personal connection? And I saw that happen earlier too with looking just to have more contact whenever things have been separated. How are we bringing people back together, even if it is in a virtual space?
Yeah, Maya and Elizabeth, I'll throw that over to you.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth throws in the great kudo board. But I think also one of the things that I have seen is giving them opportunities to engage face to face, maybe if they haven't before. So whether that's like you want to plan like a Zoom trivia night, Zoom game night, right? That's relatively low budget, depending on kind of how invested and how much time you spend on it. But I think also anything that you can do virtually that is, if gifts are your thing, right? I know there are a lot of services where you can say like, I want to send everyone on this list like a little $5 Starbucks card, or even if you just want to say we nominate people after they reach so many hours, that's also something to keep in mind too.
I remember we did it was a team thing, but it was the Kudo board just stuck out to me as a really interesting way.
What's a Kudo board? Can you explain it a little further for those who
Kudo
haven't
board.
heard of it?
Yeah, so think about like the slide that Court has sharing. If it was just a blank blue slide, then the Kudo board, that should be selling their software. Kudoboard.com is the one we used, I think. But it just creates a space where we all have access to write on it. So it was really neat. And I think the way you could translate this is to invite, prep them, but 4 or 5 staff members to have some fun pictures that they've collected, some, call outs by name of like, Maya did X and she's amazing, and AK rocks, so they're ready to write on it. And it was just this live moment where our team was all on this, PowerPoint slide, throwing on fun images and drawing a heart around that and a big exclamation mark beside that one. And it created this kind of art real fast. It was crazy where it was like big faces, shrinking them down. We kind of did just this fun project. But everybody watching it was like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So I think you could do it with your virtual volunteers, even what you've loved about working together this year, but you also could do it in front of the volunteers with the staff so that they're seeing their story and what they've mattered to the organization. I think that could be a neat way to do it. But I love what Maya said. I mean, we've done that. Most of us, I think, these days are a little bit hybrid. We're in and out, we're virtual, we're not. So that moment of like, you can still play games, you can still have fun and have, volunteer treasure hunts where everybody's running into their house to see what piece of fruit they can pull back to the screen first. I think those are the things that make people have fun together. And we're all here to build relationship, build community. We have a cause we want to make a difference in. But I think, like Court said, she remembers the people she met, the volunteer managers, people side by side, participants in the programs. That's what built her community. That's why we come back. So how do you keep building the community? That's the big question mark.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like a virtual coffee meetup. And sometimes too, what I've done in the past, especially too with, we all know how we had to get real creative in 2020, but one of the things was that I found for some groups a link to a documentary that was free to watch online, and it was about the cause that we were all volunteering in. So even though we were remote, we sent out the link and everybody watched it on their own. And then like a week later, we had a little coffee meetup on Zoom. And we chatted about the documentary, and it was helpful, I think, for connection. So sometimes you can find things like, maybe you use a Facebook group or some way of connecting virtually if you don't have that face-to-face contact, and you can share an article that would have something to do with the way in which people are volunteering with you or your program's cause, and then sort of invite discussion in that Facebook group about the article. So those are some ideas that I've used that have sort of built or sharing a picture and a little story, and then saying like, tell me your thoughts on this. I think it's a great way of opening up conversation. I think the trick is virtually, you always have to like find a way of making it an open-ended question where people are going to tell you more than yes or no, because otherwise people will just online be like, yes, or no, or like, so I think that's the challenging thing with trying to connect virtually. So we're almost here at time. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth,
I was just going to say, if for anyone as we're wrapping up who feels like, ooh, that's not my personality, or I'm not a trivia game night host, I can't do this. Look around you and ask, because we've always found, I'm not a great planner. I love to attend. So like, I have to ask someone to help me plan this, and you take the lead on it. I will be there and I will invite people, but you help me plan this. So any of the things we've talked about today, look for those people that are volunteer who has that strength, or the volunteer who's just chatty Cathy. Everybody loves them. Like, put that person at the front door, like ask them to be your face. If you don't feel you're in your comfort zone, I think I wanted to throw that out there. This is not all of our strengths. It's not all of our weakness. So it's how do we figure out where we can get the team to help us prop up anything we need.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would say I do better online than I do in person. So that's where I know my own strengths and weaknesses, but that's okay because it takes all of us. And I want to say thank you so much, AK, for managing that chat. I want to have AK drop our contact info in there. If you've got questions about the work we do with Get Connected volunteer management software, you can reach out to us. And also just, to let you know again who we are, we're Get Connected by Galaxy Digital, and we actually are a network of about 50,000 nonprofits and over 2 million volunteers using our software product, Get Connected. And we do at this time have volunteer management solutions for every organization, program size, and budget. And I just want to make an exciting announcement. We also have a new really simple, easy volunteer sign up tool that I'm excited to share. And you can check that out. It's called Shift, and you can see it at volunteershift.com. So if you've been using, different types of online signups, this is one that's really been designed with the help of volunteer managers. And so please check it out. Let us know what you think. Also, we've got an April webinar coming up. And we are going to be meeting on Friday, April 28th. I'll have AK drop that into the chat. And we're going to have Amanda Trocchi from Pittsburgh Cares. We're going to talk about planning a really amazing day of service. So we're going to talk about what it takes to sort of build a volunteer event that's successful and also hopefully doesn't feel stressful. So we're going to talk about that. And we've got the registration open for that April event. So AK, you can drop that in the chat. We hope to see you all there and want to thank you so much for being present with us today. We are really honored that you took time out of your very busy schedule to be here. And we really want to keep building community amongst volunteer leaders. So just thank you so much for being here. And we hope we see you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, AK. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Court.
April, here we come.
It's just around
Bye,
the
guys.
corner.
There
Bye.
we go. Bye.